Oh yeah, show 10 o'clock. We can go ahead and get started. And just for clarity, I just wanted to check with Chris. Are you the alternate for Kurt today?
I am.
Alrighty, we'll afford all rights and privileges to you that we would to Kurt. And Dark Kirk, are you representing Andy today as an alternate?
Unless he logs on, sometimes he's right at the wire, but I will be, yeah.
Okay. All right. I see we have Dennis, the Honorable Mary Alice Wallace, Jim Cambites, Alan Headley, myself. So I think we have a quorum, so we can go ahead and start the meeting. First item we have is the approval of the agenda. And are there any updates, corrections that we need to make to the agenda?
Yes, that COVID policy that was just sent out this morning. We need to add that as an agenda item.
Okay, and I think Brianna sent out something yesterday. It's a net motion contract, but it looks like we have that on as 11B. That document was attached, so, okay.
Where would you like me to add the COVID policy in at before the board comment after the Motorola? Or is that old business?
Well, we can consider it old business since we're going to be amending or proposing to amend an existing policy. So we can maybe put that in as 11E.
Okay.
Consideration of the COVID policy update. So are you able to do that on the screen, or so we see that? Or I guess we don't necessarily need to do that as long as you have that. So okay.
I have it written down, but I can pull up the agenda and just scroll down as we go. So I can share my screen for that. And then when we get to that part, I'll just point it out.
Okay. Is there any other amendments to the agenda other than the two that were mentioned? Alrighty. Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved. Second, Chris Smith.
Any discussion? Okay. Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, we'll go ahead with the agenda as approved.
Hey, Brad, I think Andy's in the waiting room trying to get let in.
I don't
It is.
show anyone in the waiting room at the moment.
Okay.
He was there for a moment and then disappeared.
Okay. We'll go ahead and proceed. First item we have is approval of the minutes from the meeting of January 26th. Does there anybody have any corrections to the minutes as published? All right, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion on approval of the minute meetings from January 26th.
So move.
Second.
All righty, is there any discussion? Well, hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, anyone opposed? All righty, well, we'll move along then. The minutes were approved. Now is the time for public comment. Do we have any members of the public that are logged in and want to comment?
No.
All righty. We'll move along then to item number 5. Those are the payables for the last time period, 1.1 million and change. Are there any questions for staff on any of the payables?
I had one question, if I may. Item number 139 to Weyerhaeuser Timber Holdings. Can you just tell me what that was for? What that's about? Is that a tower or something?
$10,000 to Weyerhaeuser. Was that tower rental space?
I don't know. It must be.
$10,247.40 for Weyerhaeuser Timber Holdings, Inc.
I think it might be something to do with our Abernathy site, but I would have to look at the invoice. Do you want that? You want me to do that? And I can.
I figured that's what it was. It just kind of stuck out to me, so I was just asking the question.
You want us to look at it now or look at it, report back to the board after the meeting?
You can report back as far as I'm
Okay.
concerned, Jeff.
Okay, we will do that.
Thank you.
Okay, I will note on that, the big chunk of that is about 945,000 to Patriot Construction for the new 911 center, and there's associated costs with the AdCom, more power, and the architects Rice Fergus Miller as the vast majority of that expense for this pay time period. So is there any further discussion of the payables? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion on approving the payables as presented.
So moved.
Second, Hamilton.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And you made it.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we'll move on to item number 6, resolution for appointing investment officers. Norm, is this something you'd like to comment on and present to the board?
Sure. So we are proposing resolution 2022-002 to appoint investment officers and also to rescind resolution 2018-011. So when we formed the organization, the resolution named by name Rachel Fair as the investment officer who was authorized to going through the county to make investments of our funds. So we would propose to change that to appoint the finance/admin specialist or any designated temporary or acting finance admin specialist. So that is Rachel's position, and it would cover Brianna covering for Rachel. And then in addition, name the financial analyst from Cowlitz 2 Fire and Rescue as our 2 investment officers. So that would be Brandy from Cowlitz Fire 2. So the idea is, what we found is that the county allowed us to make the transfers this time based on an email from me. But it doesn't make sense to just not have it named by position rather than by a person's name.
Okay, is there any questions for Norm or any discussion on this proposal? Okay. Well, hearing none, I'd entertain a motion on
Yeah.
approval of this change.
Hamilton, so moved.
Second, Weber.
Okay, any further discussion? Well, hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 All right.
Anyone opposed? Okay, it is that item passed. So moved. Item number 7, ECW phone refresh. So is this a Deanna
It's a me.
issue?
It's a me. Initially, we were gonna wait to do the phone refresh. We are due for a refresh, but with all the projects going on, we were going to wait. But the further that we have progressed in this relocation project, it makes sense to do it now. Primarily so that we can keep this facility up and running while we set up enough workstations over at the new facility, do all of the testing, make sure all of that equipment is running properly. And that actually leads into number 8 as well, the Motorola radio consoles. I'd like to order 3 additional radio consoles so that we can set up 5 workstations over there, maintain our 6 that are on the floor here, and basically have both locations up and running so we can go live over there, vacate here, and then we'll move the rest of the equipment over to the new facility.
Deanna, could you help me out here? I don't quite understand the terminology refresh.
Is that a rebuild of some sort or?
So we already have the licenses for the ECW phones. And a refresh is just refreshing our hardware, our backroom equipment. So we'll set up brand new backroom equipment over at the new facility. The equipment that's here will remain here until we vacate this and dismantle everything that we have here.
Okay, so that's new equipment then, basically, not
Yeah.
just cleaning up old equipment or something.
Yeah,
Is there a cost associated with this, and there be a need to go to bid on either of these items?
we don't have to go to bid for either. The Motorola is going to be, well, basically both of them would be sole source because that's the equipment that we're using now. And we're just like updating the version basically for the ECW, other than the hardware piece of it will all be new.
And the cost.
Yeah, there is a cost. For the ECW refresh is 311,000, and we did budget that in the ops budget. We're working on kind of putting together a clear vision of the facility budget to see exactly where we're at, to determine we can maybe use the ops, but we probably could use that facility budget funds as well.
And how often do you have to do this? Is this like on every a 5-year cycle
Yeah,
for that? Okay. And to clarify on the Motorola radio consoles, I know several months back, we approved buying essentially the desks.
yeah,
This would actually be the radio hardware that would go in these new desks that we bought, or dispatch centers. Is that correct?
yeah, it would be 3 additional, and then it also covers, I have a verbal quote, I don't have the written quote yet, and it's $260. But it also covers the move of all of the equipment, setting up a new back room at the new facility. There'll be minimal equipment that we'll have to purchase, and then moving everything that we have from here over there. So it'll basically be 2 moves.
Okay. Are there any, we'll break these down into like the separate items as they're listed on the agenda. Is there any further questions on number 7, the phone refresh? And that was, you said 200 and, was that?
311, 311.
311,000, and that would take care of us for 5 years.
Yeah, there's also Brad, maintenance on that, but I'm negotiating on their maintenance quote that they gave me. Their maintenance does like all the security updates. It's just like our radio maintenance contract. They replace the equipment after a certain amount of time, but I think their price is a little high. And so I'm negotiating further on that quote. I told them that they need to bring that down a bit. So it's right now their quote was like $117 a year for maintenance on the ECW phone system. And previously we were paying about $55,000 a year.
Just a question, is this, are we considering this a sole source?
Yeah.
Or, so we don't have to go to bid and we're good on that?
Correct.
Are there any further questions on item number 7, the phone system?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm curious as to the acronym ECW. Is that a technical term or is that the brand name?
It was Emergency Call Works, the brand, and I think they might call themselves Emergency Motorola Call Works now or something, but it's Emergency Call Works.
And this is a Motorola
It is.
subsidiary? You mentioned they own everything.
I know they own everything now. They bought Spillman, they bought ECW.
And this is the backbone of the 911 system. Is that correct? At least on
Correct.
dispatchers in. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'd entertain a motion on this item number.
I would move approval with Allen.
Hamilton second.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Well, hearing none, all in favor of this purchase signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Okay, it's so moved. Item number 8, Motorola radio consoles. Is there any questions for staff on that?
The one question that comes to mind for me is, does this then represent extras or spares once the transition is done? We move the existing equipment over?
Dennis, we will have a training or station set up right off of the EOC, which can be utilized for training, or if there's an activation in the Emergency Operations Center, they can utilize that CAD there. They can, project on monitors in that room, so they can see things real time. We'll also
So
have,
initially, the purchase is to help with the transitions. They'll be actually part of the
Yeah.
system as we transition over.
Yep.
And then afterwards, it'll be backup training as needed.
yeah, it also provides full workstations for the supervisors, which they don't currently have.
Oh, hence the club atmosphere for our Zoom meetings.
We have
Club room.
three additional
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So that actually answered the follow-up question. What are we doing now for that, backup and training? But we do without. Okay, thank
So,
you.
so we do end up with 3 additional consoles beyond what we have currently.
Yeah,
It'd be a total
consoles
of
never-
nine stations, is that correct?
We would have a total of 11.
11.
Counting the supervisors.
That would be supervisors, that training room, and all the ones on the floor.
Okay,
And
and
the consoles never break down, so we.
And then you can steal parts if something happens. You're never down.
and the Motorola radio consoles, this is the same equipment we bought 2 years ago, is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So this is just getting a few more of those. Okay. Is there any further discussion on the Motorola radio console purchase?
I missed the cost estimate for the consoles.
$260, and that includes the move of all the equipment from here to there and the original setup over there.
But how much do the consoles cost?
I don't have a breakdown, Dennis, because I only had the verbal quote and I'm still waiting on the written one. But I got a call yesterday and he said it was $260 and he would send the quote over.
How time sensitive is this to get the hardware? I mean, is there a delay in receiving it if we don't act today?
There is a delay in any kind of technology equipment. We're struggling with that right now. I'm waiting on about 18 PCs that have not arrived yet, that were ordered months ago.
Well, I'd leave it to the board to decide. Do you want to wait and see a written quote on this or act today?
About
I think it would be helpful to see the actual quotation and what that is, frankly.
Okay. Let's do that. Let's try to have that for the next meeting
Okay,
on the 23rd. We have part of the agenda packet to see that in writing then, so.
Okay.
Alrighty, we'll move along to 9, law tac and fire tac update. We'll start with, is there anyone from fire here that has any input? My understanding there was a joint meeting between law and fire tac recently.
Brad, I can speak. I don't think Troy's here and Brandon's not. They did have their joint meeting last week, and fire tac could not provide an update since they have not met with just them, and they don't until next week. So there's no further update between those two.
Okay, and I spoke with Troy. He's kind of been occupied a little bit with investigation down in Clark County, and basically that was his message, was that the Law and Fire TAC did meet last week, but nothing really new to report on that. Right, next up is Director's Report. Norm.
Yes, so the staffing update is basically that we are holding steady with the existing staffing. Our biggest issue is the one that's will be before you. I'm not sure. I think I missed where we're putting in the, I guess under old business, the request to revise the policy for COVID. COVID is resulting in a lot of isolation and quarantining of the dispatchers especially, which is resulting in an undue amount of overtime for the dispatchers. A lot of them are working 6-7 days a week, 12 hours a day. So it's really wearing them down. And so we'll be bringing that revision to you in a few minutes here. Climate and culture, we are pursuing training for the administrative staff, some leadership training from Dave LaFave that we're doing within the existing line items for training in the operating budget. But we're also looking at complementing that with some additional training, which we can get through our insurance agency. What is it?
WCIA.
CIA. And they will pay 50% of that. So we want to provide some additional supervisory management training to the admin staff in anticipation of getting the new director on board and allowing the new director the opportunity to continue down that path with some leadership training that would be at least queued up for that person if they choose to take advantage of it. Some team building for the entire admin team here. So we're hoping that the person that is selected ultimately will agree that that's a good use of education dollars and building the team up. So that's kind of the climate and culture report. If there's any questions on that. Hearing none then, as far as the project, we are anticipating starting the sheetrocking of the interior next week and siding the building starting the week of February 21st. So those are the two things that are most noticeable for what's going on. The systems, the mechanical, the electrical systems are still being roughed in and installed. We have some concrete pads for the generator and fuel tank being completed this week. So things are progressing, and we are still on the last update that was given of a substantial completion date in around April 20th, I believe it was 20th or 21st, I'm not sure. And if there's any update, or if there's any questions on the facility, I think I'll go to Deanna if there's any radio update.
I do. Castle Rock site, we're close. We need a meter installed there. They opened the meter box and there's nothing in it. So the permit was submitted and paid for yesterday. They're meeting with PUD today. So hopefully we can get that on a fast track through the PUD and get that done. Baker's Corner, they are going to break ground next week. And they anticipate being done with that site on Thursday of next week. Woodland site, the mayor will be meeting with Day Wireless on Monday, the 14th. I don't know if I reported last time, but we did some testing in the Kalama area with pagers at the Meissner site or from the Meissner site. That site is not going to work to resolve our coverage issues in the Kalama area. So I will be reaching out to the owners of the Deer Island site and working on finalizing a contract with them, and I'll bring that to the board when that's completed. I think that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to old business image trend update.
That's me unless there's a fire person on the Zoom. Nope, okay. Image trend, I reported last week, agreed to move forward without any additional setup fees. The fire agencies are currently working with Image Trend on the design and configuration to interface with the Spillman system. So that is moving ahead.
Okay, then the next one up was the net motion update.
Okay, NetMotion. I sent the quote, or had Bree send that out Monday, I think, or Tuesday, maybe she sent it out. This is the I don't know what term I want to use, but this is how the mobile clients will communicate with CAD, our new Spillman system. So previously we used radio IP for most of the county, except the city of Longview. And now all of the county will be moving to the NetMotion platform. And this is the quote. We've had multiple calls with them, and this is for 140 licenses. The licenses are not concurrent. What we did was purchase the same number that we had with the radio IP. Well, I'm asking for approval to move forward with this and purchase the same number that we have with the radio IP.
And then in layman's terms, these are modems in the vehicles that allow the computer to talk to the computer system, fire
Yeah.
apparatus, police cars and sort of thing. Did the center pay for the prior system, radio IP, or was that?
We did. When we went to Intergraph, we took over the radio IP costs, which were about under 8,000 a year. This is an annual cost. It's, a current technical version. It works well. The city users seem to be happy with it. I think Clark County uses it as well. We did some testing with it, and this is the direction that the users would like to go.
Okay. Is there any discussion or questions for staff on this proposed purchase?
I have one question. The number of 140, if that's covering all the existing units, or is there some spare for expansion there or anything, or do we have to add that if somebody adds units?
We would have to add those. And the licenses can be purchased 5 at a time. And they're about $125 a license with tax.
Okay. Is there any further questions or discussion on those? Well, hearing none, I would entertain a motion on this proposal.
Motion to approve the licensing for the wireless.
The modem thing.
And I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that's so moved. Next up, internet service provider update.
So I was hoping I'd have Dawn on the line here to help us talk really technical. We, meaning Dawn and I and some of the consulting team, have had multiple discussions with different internet service providers, including NoaNet, and had actually worked on a contract with NoaNet with greater technical skill than me.
Dawn actually.
Oh, he is. Dawn, do you want to speak up on this? Yep. Maybe he's not. He might be busy. He was upstairs working. But at this point, we would like to move forward with services, the internet service provider as Comcast. And I will have a contract hopefully ready by our next meeting, prior to the meeting to send out to the group. We don't have any upfront costs with them. And we kind of tamed down an original quote with them to, really what do we need? And the costs and service would be a lot better and more reliable, we felt, with Comcast as a provider. But I will have a contract hopefully in the next meeting for you guys.
Okay, I don't know, Don sent a message. He doesn't have a mic. So
Okay.
I don't know if he's going to come running in, knocking on the door or not, but this is something that'll wait till the next meeting then, it sounds like. And
Yeah.
Yes.
alrighty, we'll look for that then. Next up, we have Executive Director Recruitment Update. And Janelle, do you want to give us a rundown on where we're at on that and schedules over the next week?
Sure. So we had 13 original applicants. The search committee met and narrowed that down to 7 that we were going to do for first round interviews. One of the 7 did withdraw. So we're down to 6. Those 6 are having first round Zoom interviews tomorrow, back to back. If everything goes well with our plan is then to narrow it down to approximately top 3 that will be having in-person interviews, estimated to be the first or second week of March. Following that, we would do a more thorough, complete our final background check, and a rough estimate of potential presenting a candidate to the board, potentially as early as March 23rd board meeting. Otherwise, maybe the first one in April. And that's if everything goes to plan with the current candidates. And that's my update.
Okay, and after the interviews tomorrow, was there a deadline for everybody to get their scores submitted to you?
Yes, so after the interview tomorrow, there's 6 interviews back to back. I sent out Zoom links to all of the committee that's on that. I understand not everybody can commit to a whole day, so I'm also going to be on Friday sending out the links to the recordings of those interviews. And then you will have anybody on the search committee for the director will have until the following Tuesday, next Tuesday, to send just your scores to Dar Kirk. Each candidate will have a score out of 60 based on the interview questions. And Dar will then collect those and come up with our top scoring candidates for our next search committee meeting, which is next Wednesday.
Alrighty, well, thank you. Just hope everybody can participate and observe those and get those scores in a timely manner so we can move forward. So thanks for that. Next up, 11E, we added the proposed change to the COVID policy. So I don't know who wants to present that, Norm or Janelle.
I can present that. So as mentioned, in the email that was sent out to everybody, we do sincerely apologize for this last minute addition. We know it's not ideal. However, it's really hit us hard in the last week. We've had 4 exposed dispatchers. And per the current guidelines, they would need to be out for 5 days, even if they're asymptomatic. Essentially, we are feeling that we are at critical level in terms of staffing and in terms of burnout and excessive overtime. As mentioned before, many are working 6 days in a row, sometimes for those full 12-hour shifts. We've had potential rumors of people looking to quit. So we feel like it was an urgent matter to add to the agenda. The change in the policy was originally requested from the Guild. And this policy that we created that was sent out to everybody was given to the Guild and has their full support and strong agreement with it. They would ideally like this passed, and we feel like this will help mitigate some of these issues that we're having in terms of staffing. We do propose this as a temporary. We can revise it again in the future if need be. However, at this time, due to staffing levels, this is what we proposed. I will note, in case there are questions, this does step away from the current CDC guidelines. However, because of the staffing crisis that we're having, and because we have full Guild support, we feel like this is still important for us to pass. So we're asking for the board for a motion to pass this COVID policy today.
And I know this was short notice. I don't know if the board's had a chance to review this or have any questions on this. I think that from what I looked at this yesterday and looked at CDC, CDC still recommends a 5-day quarantine away from your workplace if you're no symptoms, and even if you are vaccinated. I believe the difference is here we aren't asking staff to differentiate between whether they're vaccinated or not. We're not asking that question. It's a kind of a blanket procedure that applies to everyone, whether they're vaccinated or not. We won't get into the discussion on the effectiveness of the vaccine or but as you said, it is kind of a critical staffing issue here, and the Guild is in support of this, is my understanding. So is there any questions for staff on this?
I have a couple of comments. Go ahead, Alan.
I just had a question. Do we have any capability for in-house testing, any of the quick tests or anything available, or can we maybe somehow include that in this?
We have not in the past had that capability. However, I have reached out to the county and they have connected me with someone. It is a 2 to 3 week process for us to get approved to be a standalone testing site officially. However, I am working with so far a few members at Cowlitz 2 to learn what their process is, to see if we can get our own tests that we can at least provide to people. But as it stands now, we hadn't been approved to be our own standalone testing site, and we don't have any supplies. And so we have put the onus on employees to get tested. We are looking to change that though, and we will as soon as possible to at least have the tests available to give to people, even if we're not approved to administer the test ourselves.
Janelle, I just noticed that
this is Jim Cambites.
Jim Cambites, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Alan. I don't want to speak for Scott, but I think given your guys' situation, both Cowlitz 2 and Longview Fire are set up for our internal testing, and I think until you establish that in a few weeks, we could help you out there if needed.
That would be probably a very big help to be able to send staff to pick up a rapid test if need be. So
the testing actually occurs on site here, and the same thing I believe in Longview.
Yeah, Yeah, we do it on site here in Station 8-1. We would just need to know that you're coming over. If you have somebody that's in need, we can help with that.
I had one.
We definitely appreciate that, and we would definitely take advantage of that. Thank you.
You know, this is Scott. I just had one question. I know, and it's not directly with this policy, there was discussion previous about development or the remote working policy. I know, especially when it comes to admin staff, is there, says these are connected. Is there any movement on that?
I did include actually in this policy, so we're changing the quarantine and isolation for dispatchers. But if you scroll down to the second page, we do say expectations for quarantine for admin and management staff. So we will still follow CDC guidelines. And then I just added the phrase, when needed, the option to work from home will be considered. So yes, certainly for admin management staff, I think that it should be taken advantage of. For dispatchers though, obviously, you can't really work from home. So.
Well, specifically, my concern was I know that we still have dispatchers in training cycles. You know, we've had some speed bumps in that road. Also, I know that there was some concern about remote working and lack of policy or direction for admin staff. And I guess that's my concern is you reference this in the policy to remote working, but if the remote working or working from home policy is not fixed, that needs to get corrected too.
Sure, I can, we don't currently have a policy. It had been previous kind of director decisions, but I can create a policy and have that presented for the next board meeting.
And I don't want to speak for the board, but I thought that was discussed previously about development of a policy or procedure, especially when we're working remotely.
I apologize. I wasn't aware if that was discussed, but I certainly can create one.
Thank you.
I guess my only question, and I'm not even sure who to direct this to, maybe Chris Smith. If we go outside of the CDC guidelines, is there any, are we taking on any liability here if something goes bad?
Well, I think, I was going to make comment too, in looking at the county Health and Human Services site, there's a couple of components that I think are pretty critical. One of the things that they request is actually, or what they recommend is actually a test on day 5. A test prior to day 5, particularly with somebody that's or asymptomatic, may not show as a positive if in fact they are positive. To answer your questions, Chief, I think that here in the state of Washington, it would be the Department of Labor and Industry that we could be sideways with regard to that. And I do believe their recommendation is to following the CDC guidelines. So I don't know if there's specific protocol. I know here at the City of Longview, we're keeping it as we should, I think, in following the professionals guidelines with regard to COVID, either close contact or someone who's tested positive. So my 2 cents.
We certainly understand, and it would be ideal for us to follow the CDC guidelines that we have been doing this whole time. However, 911 calls need to get answered. and we're at a point where we feel like we need to make these changes. I did look at the LNI website. Currently, the Washington State LNI doesn't, from what I could see, does not actually state anything about quarantine or isolation. It does have recommendations for masking and cleaning and that sort of thing. It does link to the Washington Department of Health, that then the Washington Department of Health then does say you should follow CDC guidelines. So we understand that, yes, there potentially could be some liability going out of the Department of Health and CDC guidelines. We don't necessarily think that this is in any sort of direct violation of any LNI requirements, at least what I could find on their website. However, like I said, this is kind of a temporary thing. We could revert back to CDC guidelines in the future, but with current staffing levels and also with the strong support of the guild bringing this forward, essentially, we felt like it was a reasonable proposal.
So I'll clarify a little bit. L&I actually, they don't develop the guidelines. They require, actually, they're the enforcement component. And I know that it's been in the media in the last couple of days of a several $100,000 fine up in Chehalis for 3 companies that did not follow guidelines with regard to COVID-19. So they're the enforcement group. They're not the policymakers. They just enforce the policy. And so that's where I think there would be potential to be getting in sideways if we chose to do something other than what's recommended by the professionals.
If I can make a comment, this is Scott. It sounds like it's a staffing emergency. I'm not familiar with communication center policy, but is there a avenue for the director to declare in essence an emergency at the workplace, or a workplace, you know, due to shortage of staffing, and do a reconfiguration? I know on our side, we have that ability. If we reach staffing levels that are critical, then certain things can go into place per policy and reconfigure staffing and change, actually kind of almost work outside of the contract.
I'm not aware of us having any sort of policy, and being such a small agency and the level of staffing we already have, I don't know what we could do other than, yes, maybe if we declare a state of emergency, we can declare that we won't follow certain policies. Yeah, I'm not sure on that point.
Scott, were you looking for referencing like changes in staffing levels as far as number of bodies that we'd staff, or particular like reaching out to other agencies for support, or did you have a particular avenue that you were looking for more information?
Specifically, it sounds like this is a short-term kind of issue with COVID and the staffing levels, and it sounds like instead of chasing or changing policy every time you reach a different point in the staffing matrix, to me, it just makes more sense to have a policy that catches everything. We have contingency plans in place specifically for COVID, you know, for several different avenues where we reach certain markers in lack of staffing. And then at that point, then certain things trigger for us. And I just didn't know if that existed in the communication center policy, or if this is something you want to build into this policy. So again, like you said, when your situation changes, you're going to be bringing policy back to the board for another change. And then in 3 weeks after that, coming back to the board with another policy change when it changes again in 3 weeks.
The main thing that comes to mind is contained within the radio operations manual that talks about changes in level of service and situations that would occur that would trigger changes in level of service. And that could be equipment failure, it could be staffing, it could be weather related. You can't get staff in, a number of things that could trigger it. And it would just, it's a matter of declaring that a condition occurred and whether or not we're at a point where we can no longer continue to conduct business as we would on a normal day-to-day basis. That's called for within policy. And then, like I said, it could be radio equipment failure, it could be phone, it could be natural disaster, and we're just overwhelmed with phone traffic. And at that point, we would declare that we're not no longer taking non-emergency phone traffic, and we're not, we're asking people to call back in a situation like COVID. It would be difficult to tell citizens, I think, and get them to understand that we're asking them to call back at a different time or to try and report online and give them different avenues, but that is certainly an option. I mean, to expand that just a tick more, over the last 2 weeks, we have had situations where, in order to keep from dropping to two dispatchers, supervisors have, after working their full week, come in and worked shifts to keep us from going below minimum staffing levels. So it is certainly critical, and we were just kind of looking at different avenues that would potentially provide some relief. Certainly not an ideal question, but we wanted to put it out in front of the board and kind of get some input on avenues of things that we might be able to consider.
If I can just jump in here and say the last policy we had, which was sent out, that was from last June, and it had the 10-day period that CDC was recommending at that time. They have since updated that to 5-day quarantines, and it does. And I may have misspoke earlier on that, but the CDC recognizes the difference between vaccinated and unvaccinated folks. If you're vaccinated and been exposed and have no symptoms, you can come to work. If you've been exposed and are unvaccinated, then you need to do the 5-day protocol with testing, as I think Chris was alluding to. So at the very least, I think we should update the policy to reflect current CDC recommendations, and that would include allowing staff that are vaccinated to come to work if they're asymptomatic after an exposure. So I don't know if Chris wants to correct me if I misspoke again, or if that summarizes kind of where we're at with CDC. Right?
Yeah, I think you're right on, Sheriff. And actually, we at the city are following I think it was updated on February 8th as well. The county Health and Human Services, they've been doing a great job on updating that on a regular basis. And you go on their website and it spells it out pretty succinctly, pretty much exactly how you described it. So that's the protocol that we've updated here at the city.
I will say that we don't currently ask vaccination status, but it would be my estimate that probably at least half of our dispatchers, if not more, are unvaccinated and have no plans to get vaccinated, from my understanding. So if we still are following CDC guidelines, it still puts us back in the same place of it critically affecting staffing. I'm just pointing that out.
Janelle, and I don't know if anybody else knows, you had mentioned, and not that we're a healthcare agency, but you had mentioned that there was a change in protocol for healthcare agencies that were doing something a little differently. Do you have information on that?
Yes. So not all emergency workers are classified under this. From my understanding, it's just healthcare settings. So some of the fire agencies have been able to get away with this. Sorry, that's poor wording. Able to use this exceptions. It basically is similar to what we're stating, where if there's staffing crises, even if they're sick with COVID, it's depending on who they're helping and that sort of thing, they can still come to work. So I don't know if it'd be more permissible to the board to say something like, we will still follow CDC guidelines. However, we'll be following the guidelines that are set forth for healthcare workers. That for some reason, not all emergency workers are classified under that. But that set of rules for healthcare workers are much more lax and much more allow for flexibility depending on staffing shortages, et cetera.
So I might suggest that we reach out either the state or local and have that discussion perhaps. I'd like to have, if we do something, in my opinion, that's different than what the recommendations are, I would be more comfortable if we had something that was defensible. If L&I came and knocked on the door, or somebody, a regulatory body knocked on the door and asked why we weren't following that protocol. So that might be an option. Healthcare, if they have that option, perhaps those of us that you and 911 might have that same option. I don't know, Chief Cambites, do you have anything with regard to your staff or difference in the CDC guidelines?
Yeah, we actually follow Department of Health, which is slightly different for healthcare workers. I was sitting here brainstorming and I was wondering how it is that for those of you who have children in school, I get about 2 messages a day that my daughter's been exposed at school, but that we don't need to take any further action unless there's symptoms because they are socially distanced and they're masked. And I was wondering if something like that, I'm not sure where those rules come from, but obviously there's a lot of different rules out there right now. And it seems to me something as important as a 911 center would certainly have some additional considerations. Chris, I tend to lean with you. You know, if things go bad, making a policy on paper that's outside of any type of guidance, we are putting ourselves out there for liability.
Well, just to move the discussion along for today and maybe to move off the June 2021 standard, could we maybe agree today to give the executive director the discretion to follow current LNI and CDC recommendations as currently published? And at least that improvement over the June of last year standards, and maybe you can report back on some of these other issues, whether we qualify under the Department of Health type regulations. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, and seek further guidance given our situation.
Okay.
Can I just ask, are you guys okay then, since we are not passing this immediately, that we then use the thing that Jerry mentioned and we might have to go change our minimum staffing levels or change our level of service to the agencies due to our staffing issue?
That's an executive director decision, I think, to make that call on staffing and level of service. So that's within, I think, the current guidelines. They're allowed to do that based on staffing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And I don't know if we can ask Frank, do we need a formal motion on this
I think what you have is you've given guidance. I will work with Janelle and take a look at some of the other issues. But if the board wishes to, I mean, I think it's within the authority of the executive director. I don't think you need a vote to give that. I think he has guidance. Do you want anything else, or do you want to have a further discussion on this, Norm?
No, it's fine as long as it's, recorded in the minutes, that's all.
Okay, well, let's do that. Just follow the current LNI and CDC guidelines on this, Norm, and until we get something formalized or we want to put something in writing on that. So, okay. Well, moving along, one other item wasn't on the agenda, and apologies to Frank for calling this old business, but it doesn't pertain to you being old or anything like that, Frank. I don't want to imply that, but Frank did advise us, I guess his retainer agreement is due to expire, I believe, in March, and just proposed extending that. And I had talked with Norm about just advising the board of that at this meeting. And we'll go into executive session in the meeting 2 weeks out to discuss that. In the meantime, if anybody wants to have some input to myself or Norm concerning Frank, and then we can evaluate that. And we'll have a written proposal from Frank, I assume, on that in terms of his rates going down from what, or maybe not. Okay, at least a new proposal from Frank on what costs us to retain him and with his services, but we'll certainly bring that up, like I said, in the executive session at the next meeting.
If I can add a little bit of detail to that so people can be thinking about it, and I'll go ahead and put this into an email and send it out. So prior to April of 2020, Frank was working for Wallstead Merching, and that those bills were higher than they were now that he's has his own firm or his own his own contractor. So we have 21 months of experience in our, with him working as his own law firm. And the average monthly bill over those 21 months is $2,720. So about $32,000, $33,000 annually. And the existing contract, which expires at the end of March of this year, gives us the option to extend it for another 2 years at a rate going from his current $200 per hour to $205 per hour. So it's a 2.5% increase. It is set for the next 2 years. And I talked to Frank about it, and he was fine with that amount. So that's what we would be considering at the next.
And if you want me to step out, so that you can have the conversation, I'm happy to step outside the door.
I'm thinking it's kind of new for most of the members. I would guess they'd want to do it at the next meeting. It doesn't actually have to be done until the second meeting in March even. So, I mean, it's a pretty automatic thing. We would keep all the terms of the contract basically the same. And it would be for 2 years, and the increase is slight. It's $5 an hour. So based on that, it would increase the average monthly rate by about $68 a month.
Okay, are there any questions of Norm or even Frank, since he's there on this? If not, we can, we'll circle back to that in 2 weeks and have that discussion, and Norm will get that email out, he said, with the just written terms of engagement with Frank. So, okay. Is there anything for the good of the order? Okay, well, hearing none, we're going to adjourn. Then, oh, yes.
So, hey, circling back to the COVID item, I agree with Chris Smith that we don't want to veer away from what our insurance authority would have to represent us in. So I know that the 911 agency is covered by WCIA. So maybe we would want to make sure that we've spoken to Robin at WCIA to make sure that they're okay with these changes. And I agree with Chris that we have to be able to have our insurance authority represent us. And they're not going to be able to do that if we're going outside of bounds.
Well, it sounds good, like a good plan. If Norm and Janelle can do that and use that guidance. Okay.
That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other comments on that or any other new business? Hearing none, we're going to be adjourned. However, those wanting to stay around, we're going to have a closed meeting to discuss contract negotiations with the guild and an update on where we're at with that process. So if you want to leave, feel free to leave. Then we'll go into a closed session, and we'll cut off the live stream as well. So we'll just have a meeting of the willing in terms of labor negotiations. If we can make that happen.
So Norm, the only place that it talks about anything about emergency situations and staffing is in Appendix C, but they call it Appendix E. And it just talks about in the event of an extraordinary or emergency event, you could hold the dispatcher over longer than 12 hours.